Oi, lads. There's a new video about D&D set explaining new mechanics. What? New content to consume?
Sooner or later, most D&D adventures end up in a dungeon. And for good reason. The action, the mystery, the loot. Dungeons are where it's at, and it's time to venture forth on this edition of First Look, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Dungeon is a new card type. There are 3 dungeons being introduced in this set, including Dungeon of the Mad Mage. That's a lot to take in.
What?
Why don't you pause the video and read, and we'll catch up.
Okay, mate. I've paused the video. Thank you for your instructions. Dungeon of the Mad Mage. What? What is this? It doesn't have a mana. Is it a land? Right, for the first thing we need to know is how do you play it?
Up in a few. And welcome back. Now dungeons, they don't go in your deck. They
Alright, well,
start out.
why did they say to pause it at that point? You need to
the
listen to this bit first. What the fuck?
Welcome back. Now dungeons, they don't go in your deck. They start outside the game. You can keep them with your sideboard, but, and this is important, they don't take up sideboard spots. You just have access to them, and you bring them into the game whenever you venture into the dungeon. Venture into the dungeon is a new keyword action that lets you interact with dungeon cards. That action is found on cards that very much do go in your deck, like Shortcut Seeker. When you're told to venture into the dungeon, first ask yourself, Self, am I in a dungeon? Now, you don't know what that means yet, so let's just say you're not. If you venture into the dungeon while you're not in a dungeon, you take a dungeon card from outside the game and put it into the command zone. Put a venture marker on the first room at the top. A venture marker is something small that you can use to keep track of what room you're in. For example, a coin, a die, an expertly painted miniature, whatever you have handy. Every time you enter a room, including the first one, that room's room ability triggers. The effect of that ability is what you see printed in each room. For example, when you enter the Yawning Portal, you gain 1 life.
Every time you
the
venture,
room names
you
are
go
for flavor
like
and don't
one
affect
stage
gameplay.
deeper? Okay.
Now that you're in a dungeon, the next time you venture...
Okay. I get it now. I get it now, chat. Right, where's this card again? Alright, here's all... Is this all 3 of them? I assume so. Alright, I'll let you see, chat. No T-tours here. Okay. Well, obviously, it depends on what the price is to venture. But, I mean, I guess it'll just be like learn, right? It's just on... I don't think it's going to be all on creatures or whatever. It'll just be on random cards. So some of them will be good, some of them will be bad. So these start not in your sideboard, but also not in your deck. So you basically have access to all 3 of them in every game. Like, and every deck, I guess. They're just all, there's no reason to not have them there. So this one's like, lose 1 life, lose 2 life, or discard a card. Lose 2 life, or sack an artifact, creature, or land. And then create a 4/4 with Death Touch. Or discard a card and sacrifice an artifact, a creature, and a land? What? Why wouldn't you just go down this path? Especially, it's faster to get to your 4/4 as well. Discard a card and sacrifice an artifact, a creature, and a land. Oh wait, that's not your opponent, that's you. What the fuck? Okay, that is terrible. Wait, the whole thing is terrible. This one's each player. The whole thing is completely awful. Zero mana 4/4 is terrible. Well, I think it is, right? Okay, it's kind of better if you go down this path, actually. So I would have to go in and you'd have to take that if you're like the aggro in the matchup, though. I guess you get 5 damage. 5 damage and you take 5, and you get to make a 4/4. But you have to venture 4 times. I mean, obviously this all depends on what the venture cards are, but if we assume that some of the venture cards are decent, it's actually not that bad now that I think about it. Alright, and then you have scry 1, and then either make a token or make a treasure. If you make a token, you can either put a counter on it or drain 1. If you make a treasure, you can either drain 1 or do -4/-0 on a creature, and then you get to draw a card. Notice no rarity on these cards. Yeah, I think everyone just starts with them, right? They're not in your main deck or your sideboard. Yeah, so like both players or all players just have all 3, and you just get to choose which one. When you venture, you get to choose which dungeon you go into. So then there's gain 1 life, scry 1, followed by either create a treasure or creature can't attack, followed by scry 2, followed by exile top 2, you may play them. You may play them. Not only this turn. You just can use them whenever. Or make 2 tokens, followed by scry 3, followed by draw 3 cards and reveal them. You may cast 1 of them without paying its cost. Man, what? You need to venture 7 times for that, though? Yeah, but I mean, again, like, that's not... that's something that we can't even discuss right now, right? Because we don't know what the venture cards are. We don't know if every card says venture once. I mean, what if there's a card that says venture 3 times? You know? That's like... we can't evaluate that because we have no information.
Venture into the dungeon. Venture into the dungeon is a new keyword action that lets you interact with dungeon
obviously
cards.
This card.
That action is found on cards that very much do go in your deck, like Shortcut Seeker. When you're told to venture into the dungeon, first ask yourself, Self, am I in a dungeon? Now, you don't know what that means yet, so let's just say you're not. If you venture into the dungeon,
okay,
while
I've seen this
including the first one, each room, gameplay, your venture mark dungeon level, and the one after that will give you a choice. You could head to the Goblin Bazaar or the Twisted Caverns. Either way, you'll end up in the Lost level. One more choice determines how you'll get to the Deep Mines, and finally, the Mad Wizard's Lair.
The Mad Wizard's Lair.
Each player gets their own dungeon, and a player can be in only one dungeon at a time. Once you enter a dungeon, you must complete that dungeon before starting a new one. Every time you venture, you'll progress deeper and deeper.
Can you go back into the same one if you complete one?
Card. As soon as the final room ability resolves, or it's countered or somehow leaves the stack, the dungeon is removed from the game. This action means you've completed the dungeon.
No.
Completing a dungeon is great for a few reasons.
The answer to
the
my
next time you
question is
venture
no.
into the dungeon, you can start a new one. Now you could jump right back into the same dungeon you just completed for another go. Or pick a dungeon you haven't braved before. It's your story.
You can? Well,
some cards like Gloomstalker,
right? It says it's removed from
or
the game.
A few reasons. The next time you venture into the dungeon, this action means you've braved before. It's your story. Some cards like Gloomstalker.
What do you mean, listen? How can it be removed from the game and then you can also go back in?
From the game. This action means leaves the stack. The dungeon is removed from the game. This action means you've completed the dungeon. Completing a dungeon is great for a few reasons. The next time you venture into the dungeon, you can start a new one. Now you could jump right back into the same dungeon you just completed for another go, or pick a dungeon you haven't braved before. It's your story. Some cards like Gloomstalker offer rewards for dungeon completion. It doesn't matter if Gloomstalker was around for any of your dungeon adventures. Even if you completed a dungeon earlier in the game, Gloomstalker will have Double Strike. These dungeons are filled with rewards that put you in a better spot to win the game. Venture boldly but strategically, and claim what is yours.
What was that card there? Was that good?
With reward in the game.
As long as you've completed a dungeon, it has Double Strike.
Gloomstalker will have Double Strike. These dungeons are filled with rewards that put you in a better spot to win the game. Venture boldly but strategically, and claim what is yours. Adventures in the Forgotten Realms is available everywhere on July 23rd. Check out your
July 23rd, chat. Okay, so I mean, we need to know what the venture cards are, but I mean, it seems good, right? It's just free stuff. Free stuff in Magic equals good, especially when that free stuff doesn't cost you a card. New Planeswalker, Eliwick Tumblestrom. 4 mana, 4 loyalty, +1, venture, -2. Look at the top 6, you may reveal a creature card from among them, put it into your hand. If it's legendary, you gain 3 life, put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. -7, you get an emblem with creatures you control of trample and haste and get +2/+2 for each differently named dungeon you've completed. Okay. Trash. So +1 is like scry 1. And -2 is draw a card. Absolute dog shit, chat, I'm sorry. I apologise to rain on your memes, but I am the meteor of memes, and this card sucks. It seems pretty goddamn good in draft though. Would be okay at 3 mana? At 3 mana it's still got some weaknesses, man. I guess it's got high loyalty for 3 mana, but even still. It's no Narset, is it? +1 could be very strong if you're already in a dungeon. I don't know, man. Because I mean, like each individual venture is like they're not that strong, man.
Sooner or later,
like over the course of the game, if you venture many times, you get a lot of value, yeah, but so you're paying 4 mana for this, you venture once. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you are in your dungeon, it's not going to be that good. Like, it's going to be, like, make a token, make a treasure, you know, make 2 tokens if you're super lucky and you're really far in. You're assuming those are the only dungeons. No, I'm not. They said it's the only dungeons. Yeah, your venture, if to play a venture card, it has to be, your venture cards have to be good enough. Like the only venture cards that will be playable will be the ones that are good enough where if you're venturing for the first time in the game, your card is still good enough, right? Like these 5th ventures, like the bottom tier ones, they are completely irrelevant. Like it has to be not enough, or has to be a small enough tempo loss when you're on your first venture. So the first ventures are very weak, right? Gain 1 life. Each player loses 1 life. Scry 1, you know? Like, they have to be standalone good cards. If they're standalone good cards, then yeah, sure. I mean, it's just free shit in it. It's great. But this Planeswalker, for example, is nowhere near good enough, right? Because If you play 4 mana, 5 loyalty Planeswalker and you're doing the first venture, I mean, that is a game-losing play. Game-losing. The dungeon cards are so bad. They're not so bad, that they're absolutely incredible, but because they're free stuff. But the dungeon cards are not relevant, man. It could... If every single stage of the dungeon said you gain 1 life, it would still be OP. But that's not... That doesn't matter. It's the venture cards that matter. Do you restart the dungeon when you're done? When you're done with one dungeon, you can start a new dungeon. You can start any of the 3, though. You don't have to go back into the same one. The white card is really good. Guys, where are you seeing these new cards, man? What is going on? Nadar Selfless Paladin. Allow me to control plus a few times. 3 mana, 3/3 Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, venture. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. Worse than Heliod, so it's shit. I mean, tough crowd. Okay. 3 mana, 3/3 Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 1. When you attack, you scry 1. Is that good? So, your Nadar Selfless Paladin deck is probably going down the Tomb of Annihilation, right? Most of the time. Maybe this one sometimes. Both players lose 1 life, both players lose 2 life, both players lose 2 life, make a 4/4. I don't know, man. It's not the worst thing in the world, you know. Like, given your mono white deck, or like Boros deck or something, a bit of reach on a decent creature, I wouldn't write it off, guys. Because that is an enormous weakness of white creature pile, isn't it? That they have no reach. And now you have 5 damage of reach. You forget that we haven't seen the payoff cards for venturing. What do you mean we haven't seen the payoff cards for venturing? They're on the fucking screen. They're on the screen, dude. These are likely not the only dungeons. They said at the start of the video, there's going to be 3 dungeons. And this...
Dungeon is a new card type. There are 3 dungeons being introduced in this set, including...
There are 3 dungeons being introduced in this set. Trust me, man. I listened closely and intently to all Magic the Gathering related videos. I'm at one with the information. Okay, chat. What do we think, man? I think this Nadar is pretty good. I think it will be, because it really does give you access to a resource that white pile has no access to, which is burn. 5 damage of burn, man. I mean, sometimes you'll go down this middle one if the game is correct for it, but this left one is great for white pile. It is a Dragon Knight, yeah. So I think this card's decent, yeah. Destroying your own shit is no bueno. No, but you don't destroy your own shit, man. You just take you take the life loss, right? You're playing an aggressive deck. You take the life loss, your opponent takes the life loss, and that's a lot better for you than it is for them, right? Left dungeon's 3 steps. It's 4 steps. Your first adventure is the top one, right? You don't like get this top one for free. Streamer maybe turning a new leaf. Not every card is shit anymore. Well, every single card that we've seen so far, apart from this one, is shit. Yeah. I can already tell Mr. Streamer hates this mechanic. I don't hate it. I think it's cool. Hey, hopefully it's good enough that we actually get to use it. I don't hate any mechanic, man. Not really. Anything new is okay with me. Maybe not anything, but most of the new things, I'm fine, man. What the things I don't like are when they make a new mechanic like learn and then make it too bad to use it. It's just dumb. That pisses me off. But I don't hate the mechanic, I just hate that I can't use it. Mill? Well, I don't inherently hate mill though. I hate mill in conjunction with only being allowed to have 40 cards in my deck. Do you think the oubliette room? I mean, I don't know how to pronounce that. Is it oubliette? But yeah, it's like... This is just absolutely terrible, isn't it? Discard a card, sack an artifact, a creature, and a land. I mean... I play my Nadar Selfless Paladin, which allows me, when it enters the battlefield, to venture into the dungeon, and now I will sacrifice it to oubliette. And I will also discard a card, and I will also sacrifice an artifact, and I will also sacrifice a land. Your go. Do you have to venture one time after the last room to complete it? No. So the first time you venture, you do the first one, and then you make this choice, and then you go down, and then once you venture for like the 4th time, you make a 4/4 token, and then this shit leaves the battlefield, right? But the guy on the video said that once it leaves the stack, so I mean, I guess you can stifle your opponent's 4/4. Guess. If all your cards say venture, you could make a few early 4/4s. Yeah, but that's the thing, right? It is extremely unlikely to borderline impossible that there will be enough good venture cards that you can just fill your deck with venture and play. I'm going to play Naya Venture. Naya Dungeon. That's my deck name. That's not gonna happen, right? Like what's most likely to happen is you'll just play a normal magic deck and you'll have some venture cards in it. From Teamer Adventures to Teamer Ventures, yeah. That's the rotation. Minus ads. Ecuador! Ecuador!